Wow. Whew. So, I'm a historian, and historical interpretation has been my field. I spend my time looking at places and objects and buildings and documents, determining what the intrinsic story of each has to tell, and then I build programming around it. So that's like my day job. And I came to that work over 30 years ago when I began researching the story of the Underground Railroad here in Montgomery County. And I tell this story in various ways, but it's kind of the same story. So if you heard this earlier today or earlier this week, you can go get dessert right now. But I just have a different angle on it. So 30 years ago, I walked the route of the Underground Railroad from Sandy Spring to Canada on May 4th, 1996. Tomorrow will be the 30th anniversary of that. And I got interested in the story of the Underground Railroad when I was a returning student at American University in 1993, and was given an assignment as part of my bachelor's that I was pursuing for history to document some part of African American history that had gone unrecorded. So I chose the story of the Underground Railroad because it was secretive in nature, and at the time we didn't really know much about it. It was relegated to legend, lore, but it was a real thing, but there weren't records because people didn't keep records, and anyway, I thought it would be an interesting topic for my school paper. And at the time, like now, I was living in Montgomery County and volunteering on weekends at the Montgomery County Historical Society. And so I thought that for my paper I needed a Montgomery County topic that I could study and write my paper on while I was at the Historical Society library doing my volunteer work. Yes, I'm a serial double dipper. And so I remember going in this one Saturday, and one of the archivists was there. She had been with the society for decades, and she knew where everything was. And so I said, hey, I'm working on this project, the Underground Railroad in Montgomery County. What do you know of it? And she said, well, there was no Underground Railroad in Montgomery County. She said, Montgomery County was a southern county in a southern state. She said, we sided with the Confederacy and we sent our finest men across the river to join General Lee. And she said, and in the 1860 election, only 5 people in Montgomery County voted for Abraham Lincoln. Now I'm queuing this up because this is like an audience participation thing. So when I say something that appeals to your ear, I want you to make a lot of noise, you can applaud, you can even jump out of your seat. And I said, 5 people, who were they? And she leaned in, which was very strange to whisper because there was nobody else in the room. And she said, they were Quakers. Yeah. That's right, you lots. And I said, Quakers, the Underground Railroad. Yes, I'm in. So there was an Underground Railroad. but finding it was not so easy. At the time, I found a love for genealogy, and so I decided just to treat my search as though I was looking for a long-lost relative. And so I started, first of all, just reading local histories of different communities in Montgomery County. And one of the first things I fell upon was Farquhar's book on historic homes of Montgomery County. And one of those homes that was mentioned was Bloomfield. The Bentley property, just right that direction. And a story about Bloomfield, about a freedom seeker, a fugitive slave, coming to the house of the Bentleys one night and knocking on a window. Now, mind you, over time I found 3, maybe 4 variations to this story. One time it was the door, maybe the side door, there's variations. But anyway, so he knocks on some point of egress, and friend Bentley appears, and he said, "Mr. Bentley, would you please point me out the North Star?" And according to legend, friend Bentley pointed. And I don't know, didn't say anything, but he pointed. I thought it was the strangest story I'd ever heard about the Underground Railroad in Montgomery County, which I was just figuring out was here. It was strange because it told of an assist in Underground Railroad parlance to give someone a little bit of information, but not put them in a wagon or hide them under your staircase or active participation. It was an assist, and I thought that was so strange, because how did the man know to go to friend Bentley to even ask about the North Star? And Richard Bentley was a very industrious person. Certainly could do more than just point, right? So I always was a little suspicious about this story, but in a good way. I thought, no, there's probably something more here. Fast forward, we'll say this for another time. I don't need to tell you all the gory details, but over the next few years, I found multiple accounts of that scene, and eyewitness accounts from Bentley's one of Bentley's granddaughters who was there at the time, and also reference from other family members amongst the archives of a man named Wilbur Siebert, who was a professor of European history at Ohio State University, who wrote one of the first comprehensive histories of the Underground Railroad in the 1890s, and then would have all of his grad students talk to people in their neighborhoods or their families, ask them what they knew about the Underground Railroad. Before long, he started corresponding with people across the country, and 3 letters made it to and were returned from people here in Sandy Spring, talking about the activity. We know a lot more about the Underground Railroad. Well, Sandy Spring aside, I was able to document 30 points of interest in our county which told the Underground Railroad story, document 6 routes of escape, and 3 safe houses. I wrote my paper, I got an A, and then I graduated. Thank you. Graduated with an American Studies degree and a mystery greater than that of the Underground Railroad, which is, what do you do with an American Studies degree? You keep volunteering. So I went back to Historical Society, and the same archivist who said there was no Underground Railroad looks up one day and says, "Hey, did you ever do that paper? I was like, yeah, maybe. And I eventually showed it to her, and she showed it to the board of Montgomery County Historical Society, who said, wow, we should publish this thing. And they got a grant and published 500 copies of this just, little monograph called The Underground Railroad in Montgomery County, A History and Driving Guide, which to my horror, I found online a few years ago being sold for $750 through Abe Books. And, I wanted to post something on their website. Don't pay for it. I'll send you a free PDF, but whatever. Wait a minute, pay me the $750. Woo! I was a slow learner. After discovering that the county did have an underground railroad, and that people were interested in it, I started being asked to go and speak at different public schools. And every time I went to a different school, I tried to bring the local story of the Underground Railroad. And one time when I was speaking in Rockville at a little school called Green Acres, private school, I was telling the kids about how Rockville Pike was used on the Underground Railroad, and gave them accounts of people who had traveled that road. And one boy raised his hand and said, Mr. Cohen, were you afraid when you escaped on the Underground Railroad? Yeah. I was like, okay, kid. No, I said, what an amazing question, young man. But that gave me an idea. What if we could go back in time, live the lives of our ancestors, if for a day, come forward in time, and share with the living what we had learned. Then summer was approaching. I had a 2-month window between jobs, and I decided I was going to just follow one of the routes. And so, to spare you an even longer story, I ended up walking to Canada. I started from Sandy Spring, Maryland. Actually, my first steps were from the meeting house here. Walking up Meeting House Lane to Brook Road and across to the Sandy Spring Slave Museum, which had been open for about a year and a half, something like that then. The project of Dr. Winston Anderson. And from there, a group of us gathered, and then I struck off for Canada, that time alone. It was a solo project. People wished me well. They thought I was crazy. They were right, I was crazy. I walked 10 to 25 miles a day, traveling through Maryland, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, kind of. I didn't walk through New Jersey. I was put in a box in Philadelphia and smuggled on an Amtrak train. That's a different story for a different time. And then from New York up the Hudson to Albany, and then west across the Mohawk River Valley, Erie Canal, and then crossed at a little riverside landing in Buffalo. And after that, I kind of fell into the work that I do as an experiential or experimental historian, preferring to go to the places that history happened, to go through the steps of history. For instance, I run a living history center in Germantown, where we interpret plantation life in Maryland, the story of the Underground Railroad. So we grow the crops that were grown in Montgomery County during that time, discovering what they did through old agricultural records, things of that nature. Anyway, so fast forward 30 years or 29 years to last January. About the time of an inauguration, And just getting the feeling that maybe our country was backsliding. Yeah, we'll give it a maybe. And, people saying, history is going to be destroyed. Our history is going to be taken away from us. We're being dragged back to the 1950s. And certainly not sentiments I would disagree with. But I don't know. I don't know anyone who owns a poodle skirt, so I don't know anyone who's willing. You do, Tom? Yes. How did I know? How did I know? Did you bring it on the walk? You'll let me borrow it sometime? Okay. No one I know is going to go back and live darker times. And everyone I know has a vision for the future. And that's why I decided that maybe it was time to walk again. To follow the path of one of the best ideas that has ever graced American history. And that's the story of the Underground Railroad.
Amen. Amen.
And my hope for the walk was to help our country focus on a more positive side. Certainly not to ignore the headlines, but not that we have to live the headlines, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, our communities, our families, and our kids are really the most precious resources we have. And only we can preserve those. So, I was asked last June to speak at the national gathering of an amazing organization called Coming to the Table. And yes, we have some Coming to the Table crazies, groupies over here. Yes. Yes. And I told my story about the walking to Canada in 1996, and I announced that I was doing it again, which I figured would be a solo effort, another solo effort. But watch what you asked for, because I said, and when I walk to Canada, I'd like you all to join me. And that is exactly what's happening. So Coming to the Table stepped up and said, hey, we would like to be part of this project and organizing this walk. And in a minute, I'm going to ask someone to stand up and just say a little yep. And Freedom Walk 2026, 750 miles thereabout from Sandy Spring, Maryland to Canada. Traveling through all the aforementioned states, pretty much along the same path that I followed in 1996. We decided to do it on May 4th of 2026, so we could do it to the same date 30 years later. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. we're gonna gather here, and about 9:15 we're gonna walk up the Meeting House Road and across the Brook Road and go to the Sandy Spring Slave Museum, walking in our own footsteps. So it'll be really powerful, and I invite everyone who's here to join us. There's going to be a 2-hour event at Sandy Springs Slave Museum, 10 to noon, which we will have, I think there's going to be drummers There's going to be speakers. There's going to be a tour of the museum. And a very special guest that is joining us on the walk. And that is one and only Harriet Tubman. In the form of a 2,200-pound bronze statue called Tubman Journey to Freedom. Yes. The statue was sculpted by a friend of mine, a man named Wesley Wofford from North Carolina, who designed the sculpture in 2018, something like that, for a private client. And then once he delivered the commission and it was all paid for, the client said, I have a different idea about the space I was going to put it in. Can you keep it? And then they brokered a deal to basically send it around the country, share it with the nation. And so from 2019 to last year, it toured almost nonstop. A few months ago, I called my friend just to catch up and talk with him. And he told me that since the inauguration, people had stopped requesting the statue. They were either afraid of retribution for having an object that looked like DEI, or that they still wanted the statue but they had lost their funding. And I said, well, where's the statue? He says, it's in mothballs. It has been in mothballs for the year. And then I said, Wesley, I have an idea. And he said, oh my God, you want to take the statue on the road with you? And I was like, don't pretend that was your idea, Wesley. Yes, I want to take the statue. So we hatched this idea to get a lowboy trailer, flatbed, about 2.5 feet off the ground, bolt the statue to it, so it could then be towed by F-150. I think we're getting an F-250, and it could go anywhere. Didn't need any special equipment to move it. And so the statue will be joining the walk, not trolling along at 3 miles an hour like I walk, but while I'm walking, while the team is walking, while we're sleeping, the statue will be going to communities that wouldn't get this kind of thing. It'll be visiting schools. It will roll up, invited or not, at a few courthouses and public spaces. Yes. And Harriet will be an emissary for the journey, which will be following her route. So we think it'll be a wonderful confluence of, past and present. What else can I say? Thanks to the generosity of Sandy Spring Friends Meeting and the gift of the Traveling Minute, Quaker communities across our path have been opening their doors to us. So we couldn't be more thankful for that. And yes, we will have base stations in Baltimore starting tomorrow at Stony Run, Friends Meeting. Then Burlington, Friends Meeting, Burlington, New Jersey. Brooklyn Friends Meeting, Oakwood School, which is associated with Poughkeepsie, Friends Meeting, so forth and so on. So, yes, Toronto, and Belle McQuail. Belle McQuail is our
Ranger of Refuge.
Arranger of refuge, yes. So here's what I'm going to do.